It's not a lack of affirmation of leadership, clergy or lay. It's just I'm not sure, people are unsure how they're going, whether they're ready for a capital campaign or not. So it's good news. I would take, you only had one person who said, no, I don't think lay leadership is ready for a project like this, and 3 people out of 48 or so said that for the pastor. So I take that as a very strong positive. Usually there are a lot of people who don't like leadership for a variety of different reasons. And I'll be happy to tell you about it in my neighbor's church at least. Okay? I believe that if you decide to go forward with the capital campaign here at Wellspring, you really need to ensure that there are respected and trusted laypersons who are anchoring that campaign. It doesn't need to be anchored around Pastor Chris. It needs to be anchored in laity. So the confidence in lay leadership is positive here, but there were at least 5 comments, which you can read later, where there was some concern expressed that lead me to wonder about what I want to say is the leadership bandwidth, the available capacity for your lay leadership to take on a major project like this. I would encourage you to do a leadership census and try and discern how many hats are your leaders wearing. If you have leaders wearing more than a couple of hats, they're stealing a role from someone else. And as I said in the first service, I'm a recovering Presbyterian, and my mom thought that stealing was wrong. I'm not trying to off my value set on you, but the idea is that if you're wearing more than 2 hats, it's pretty likely that you're taking a potential role from somebody else. And what I hear a lot is, well, young people don't want to help with this or that. Well, that perhaps says more about you and what you're asking them to do and how you go about doing it than it does about your church. I've had young people say to me, man, they asked me to serve on this committee. Who wants to serve on a committee? Committees meet, generally, teams play. The young people that I've met who are passionate about Christ and the mission of Christ in the world, they don't want to sit on a committee. They want to change the world. And if you at your church have a plan to change the world, they'll gladly roll up their sleeves and give 150% of their time and energy and money to make that happen. If you don't have a plan to change the world, they'll sniff that out pretty quick and be on down the road. But it's possible that Wellspring is trying to do too much in terms of the scope of your ministry. Church ministries and programs tend to grow in their environment, sort of like barnacles grow on a boat. What I would encourage you to do is anytime you launch a new initiative, I'd encourage you to do a review of what's currently going on and unplug from something that's not thriving. If a ministry or program or initiative, my personal opinion, is not thriving, you need to unplug it. You need to be focusing what time and energy and money you have on thriving ministry. I'd rather you have one thriving ministry than 10 or 15 that are kind of limping along. The key is that engagement is crucial at Wellspring. The objective, the goal, if you will, is for all 222 of your members to have both a place to belong and a place to serve in the Christian community we call Wellspring United Methodist Church. To the degree that people are not engaged and involved with a place to belong and a place to serve, that dynamic will put a damper on everything you ever try to do in the congregation. We ask question 12, would you prayerfully consider, again, consider is the operative word, a 3-year gift over and above your annual contribution to support the proposed capital campaign? 50% of your people said yes. An additional 13 families, 27%, were unsure, and 11 families, for whatever reason, almost a quarter, said no, we would not. And doesn't have to be that they don't believe in the mission of the church. That might be true for some people. It's possible that they just don't have any money to give for whatever reason. Maybe they gave a gift somewhere else. Maybe they, they lost their job. I mean, there's a whole variety of different things. But 23%, for whatever reason, said, no, we've already made a decision not to support the campaign for various reasons. I believe over the next 6 months or so, if you decide to move forward with this project, that as people engage with their own prayerful discernment, as they learn more about what's going on in the local church and why these projects are important, their engagement and participation and then momentum will increase along with that. Now, question 13, we asked the question, what range of a gift might you consider, this isn't a commitment or a pledge card, but what range of a gift might you consider for a 3-year commitment? And this is what we got. Now, I want to talk you through an example, which is better seen or charted out on a whiteboard really than presented verbally, but the key issue is leadership gifts, pace-setting gifts are crucial to the success of any capital campaign effort, regardless of how much you're trying to raise, whether it's trying to raise $250,000 or $200 million. It's the same principle. All the responses that we received are like puzzle pieces, and they can fit together in different ways to create a different picture. That's where the puzzle piece analogy breaks down. But to set the stage for succeeding in a campaign of $400,000, approximately the amount that your projects total over a 3-year period, the church will need at least one gift in the range of $40,000 to $50,000. There will need to be at least 5 gifts in the range of $12,000 to $25,000 or so. The survey showed 2 possible gifts between $10,000 and $19,900. So there's still a lot of headroom there that's unaccounted for, which is pretty usual, but still there's an absence of those leading gifts to set your trajectory to $400,000 if that's the goal, for example. There would need to be about 10 gifts between $7,000 and $10,000, and the survey indicates 6 possible gifts in the range of $5,000 to $9,999. So the lack of these pace-setting, leading gifts is a concern, but something that needs to be kept in mind. Leadership sets the tone for what's possible. I've been working, Horizon Stewardship's been around since 1992. I'm just starting my 12th year with Horizons. I'll usually run anywhere from 5 to 7 campaigns a year. And in my experience over the last 11 years, I've only seen one campaign personally that didn't fit the kind of profile that I was outlining for you verbally. And I've heard about one other in that time. Generally, you'll have a lead gift. A family's gift will approximate about 10%, 10 to 14% of the total. If you don't have that gift, chances of you hitting the goal, whatever that goal happens to be, are at best remote. Okay? This is, I didn't create a slide for this. Question 15 was, would you consider including Wellspring United Methodist Church in your will? The good news is that 10% of the people surveyed said, I already have. You have 4 families who've made a decision already to include Wellspring in your will. And 5 other families would consider such a gift. The key is people need to understand how those bequest gifts will make a difference in the future of the church. That's a communication challenge for you. Before I get to what do we see and what's that mean, I ask a question sort of my kitchen drawer question, I call it. Question 16, any additional comments or insights for leaders? Someone said, look at the reality of what we've seen in contributions given, the growth of the church, which then reflects the attitude of the people. And I agree with that, by the way. To really know if this church should continue on in this location, especially with Asbury and Bethany being so close. The proximity of other churches, period, or other churches in your denomination is almost totally irrelevant. The United Methodist Church would be in a very, very different place, in my personal opinion, if one of the objectives was to plant churches like crazy. Now, they come up with a better phrase than that. But one of the things that the Southern Baptists have taught us is that when you have an initiative to plant churches, even if there are 3 other churches in that same denomination nearby, those churches all tend to, it raises the level of water in the harbor. All the boats sort of float better. Those who can't compete, you know, it's possible to go out of business, but that's part of life. So I don't think Asbury and Bethany being close, bless you, is any problem at all. Okay, what do we see? Let me share some conclusions with you. I think the most important thing that Wellspring can do is to pay attention to what you're growing here. It's all about discipleship, as I mentioned earlier. Discipleship implicates giving in a direct way. When I look at the church, I see one thing. When I look at your area demographics, I see something very, very different. According to one source, the average household income in your 3-mile radius is $83,835. And some of you are thinking, not at our house, it's not. But that's what the data shows. More to the point, I think, the median household income in Madison is just shy of $50,000 annually. Household income. Now, what I want you to think about is if this church were tithing against that median household income, your annual offerings would be in excess of $500,000. So the issue is not we're poor and deprived in Madison. That's not the issue. Again, I think it's a discipleship challenge. I think there are 4, at least, factors that will influence a successful capital campaign effort. Number 1, as we just talked about, there's stewardship discrepancy between the area income norms and the giving here at Wellspring. Number 2, operationalize the vision. I'm assuming you have a vision for what you want the church to be and become and be a presence in your community over the next 5 to 15 years. Or maybe not. But the point is, you have to operationalize that, put action behind it. Not just words on a page, you have to know where you're going and you have to move out and get there. Why are these projects on the table right now, and why is now the time to address them? I'd encourage, as somebody in their comments suggested, have some tours. Walk people down to the, I don't know what you call it here, but the furnace room, and let people know what aging, you know, hung together with duct tape and baling wire, as we would say in Texas, furnace looks like, or whatever your issues are. And then ask people a couple of questions. One question would be, would you live with this very long in your home? Now some people say, oh, it doesn't bother me. But other people would be pretty quick to say, a lot of times ladies, absolutely not. We wouldn't have that at our house. And so help people understand why this is important and why is now the time. And again, communication, communication, communication. People need to understand why it's important, how it ties in to your mission moving forward. I believe you're ready for a successful campaign. Now, some people are thinking, well, sure, that's what you do. You obviously say that. Let me be real clear. I'm a truth teller. I got a couple of my kids here that can tell you that's an important value in our home. It's absolutely not in anybody's best interest for me to encourage you to move forward in a project that you're not going to be successful in. for two reasons. Number one, it's not good for the local church, it's not good for the kingdom of God. And number two, it's not good for Horizons. Horizons doesn't advertise. Our clients, our friends really, are the best testament to what we do. And we have zero interest in you all not having a successful effort and then running around, oh, you know, well, we worked with Horizons and it was a disaster and this happened and that happened. We routinely tell people, now's not the time for you to move forward. So I believe that you're ready for these reasons. The majority of people are at least somewhat familiar with the plans that you have on the table. Secondly, people love this church. There's no question about that. Related to the first point, 90% of people are supportive of exploring a capital campaign. Now, for the purposes of this study, what we were asking about was how supportive are you of exploring the campaign? We didn't say how supportive are you of actually engaging in a campaign. It was a little premature for that. But I think people generally are going to be supportive. The other good news is that you've not had a recent capital campaign. It's normal for a healthy, growing church to have a capital campaign every 6 to 10 years or so. In fact, almost any church can run a campaign about every decade for something and leapfrog forward in ways that you never could just utilizing your annual budget. Now, here's the kicker. Your projects total out right around $400,000. I believe that you can have a successful campaign in the range of $200,000 to $250,000. Now, you might say, well, that's not what we need. What you need, what your projects total, or what your hopes and dreams total, have absolutely nothing to do with your ability to raise that money. Zero. Okay? Your capacity is one thing, your wild hopes and dreams are something else. So that's my bottom line. I think in the range of $200,000 to $250,000. Now, is the capacity here to exceed that? Absolutely. I believe it is. But we just haven't seen any indications of those leading gifts that would alter the trajectory up to the $400,000 range. Routinely, I have people who either call me after a campaign, send me an email, or talk to me toward the end of a campaign from local churches, and they'll say, John, you were wrong. And I'll say, okay, it's not the first time, obviously. But they'll say, well, you said we could raise this, and we raised that. And I'll say, well, I'm okay to be wrong there. What I don't want to do, and we will not do, is tell you, oh, you can raise this much, and then you come in down here. Now, does that happen occasionally? It does. But more often than not, we're projecting on the low end. I'd rather have you exceed your goal and be excited about it than to just go around creating disappointment with the situation being opposite from that. A couple of additional pieces before we get to questions. Where do we go from here? I want to make 3 general recommendations in addition to everything that I've said before. This can be a confusing place. I like this quote from Sadat in his autobiography, who said, "He who cannot change the very fabric of his thought will never be able to change reality and will never, therefore, make any progress." I believe that that's true. Your primary challenge has to do with changing the way that you think about Wellspring, changing the way that you think about ministry in the world today. As somebody shared with me after the first service, reminded me of the Gandhi quote that makes this point in a positive direction: be the change you want to see. That's the challenge for Wellspring. The first thing I would recommend is for you to move forward with the capital campaign to secure your mission station. Number 2, parallel with all that, I'd initiate some discernment and conversations about what's next for Wellspring. That is not clear. The situation at Wellspring, the best that I can determine, looks a lot like this. You're floating or drifting, or you're stuck. One or the other. I like this quote or paraphrase from Calistad: without a vision, people go to another parish. And that is absolutely true in our world today. People church hop and move a lot. The third piece is to implement a realistic action plan. You have got to do something, and you've got to move out in the direction that you feel God's calling you to move in. You cannot continue to drift and try and hold your own. I think that's a fantasy. As you're sitting and drifting, the world is passing you by, and churches that get it, if you will, like the church that my daughter goes to in Louisville, they are about the Father's business. I mean, they're doing kingdom stuff and connecting with, ironically, younger people who really want to make a difference in the world. It's an amazing thing to see.